Call the meeting to order. Week number 6, if I'm not mistaken. Trying to get a budget done for fiscal year 2020. Councilor Hamilton, I'm going to turn to you.
Somebody missing a
Made
microphone.
a statement last week that you wanted to, what was it, discuss more, or I forget the word you used. Talk about it a little bit more. So,
You mean the overall budget?
the overall budget, yes.
So I thought a couple areas that I brought up. One, we're going to revisit and look at the question about health insurance. That was
And that's been provided.
an issue to come back. Also, I felt it was important to discuss some of the positions that have been proposed, walk through that, and I would like to have a little more discussion on essentially each, kind of a high overview of each of the departments, what's being requested, and where are we in agreement, where do we disagree about some of the expenditures, so that we can have some discussion over it. Because to this point, we've heard the presentations, but we really haven't had a chance to really explore those areas. So that's what I'm wanting to have
Okay.
for discussion.
Tim, you want to go start with the insurance?
Absolutely. So within the paperwork that I left in front of you,
Right here.
that one that David's holding up right there, Banner, thank you. David and I worked through this, and I know based on the discussions last week, we were talking about increasing rates of pay versus what the employees are expected to pay. Based on some recommendations from the city council, David and I looked at it, and we are proposing a 7% of the PBO 2500 with a 2% increase.
Increasing salary, 2%?
Increase in salary.
Yeah, the regular COLA.
Yeah, right there. Right now, I just want to remind you.
Which in this case has
4%.
nothing to do with the insurance, other than it's part of the broader
Okay, so it's the regular
compensation.
COLA.
Right, yeah,
No- So there's no salary increase related to the health insurance?
No.
premium?
correct.
And just to kind of explain that spreadsheet that you have, it shows what the current estimated annual cost of the PBO 2500 versus the USC, what those savings are, putting this HRA into effect, what their current salary is, the 2% increase, 7% of the PBO 2500, what their annual contribution rate is right now, and that variance equals the difference between their 2% increase and the increase in the PBO 2500 and the current annual salary. So it comes to, like that first line, the variance of that is $1,210.43. Does that make sense? You understanding?
Which means they are $1,200 ahead at the end of the.
Correct.
Okay.
But, so it cut into some of their 2% increase. If you look at that, for example, they received $1,530, but because of the increase in the PBO 2500, they'd only be, the variance would be the $1,210.43.
Okay. And nobody goes under.
Nobody goes under.
Good. That was one of my goals. Thank you.
When I built in 10%, we had multiple people that were bringing home less money.
How are some of the other departments, the unions, for instance? Is that the same numbers, 7%?
Well, no, but in the other cases, there's a salary bump to offset it. So I believe the suggestion at the last budget meeting was, rather than doing a embedded salary increase, to rather look at a lower percentage on the contribution side. If I took it away right. And that's
That was
what,
my understanding as well.
and that's what Tammy's calculated based on that. But like with the police contract, Glenn, was it 61 cents? 52. Sorry, I just gave you a raise. 52 cents. It's hard to remember 3 different units, but that was built into it. It varied depending on the model, the hours worked, the structure.
Questions, comments? Council
Just a
Ford?
comment, I started a few minutes ago, but one of my goals going into this, that we did not do damage to any of our employees. This has done it. I don't see anything that's out of shape. We also have got our annual costs down from $600,000 by what, 219,000 savings on the bottom line
Significant.
in one budget year.
But when we fund the HRAs, that's not really gonna be a
That's
total
true.
savings to the city.
That was gonna be my next comment, is that, and we're funding the HRAs, but if by national standard, they only expend 45% of that, we'll save a little over $120,000 in that line.
And we budgeted
50%. And I think the average experience was somewhere in the low 40s, wasn't it, Tim?
Yeah, it's 44 or 45.
Yeah.
I'm good with this. I think it's a good trade-off all the way around.
It's an important step for the future healthcare coverage in the city of Ellsworth.
We're also looking at a percentage based on just a flat rate. It's always been $936.
Right. It's all a percentage now.
Tammy, this doesn't do anything on future rates though, does it?
No, but we're looking at the personnel ordinance right now, and I know we've spoken with Councilor Hudson, and we're looking at building something into the personnel ordinance so it takes effect in future years.
Okay.
But again, this is non-collective bargaining, so it's year to year anyways.
Right. We all set on the insurance?
Does anyone, I could bump it up a little, I mean, would you be interested if I put a date or something?
Or other scenarios.
Scenarios.
I think this is a good first step.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
That's a good first step.
Tim, is there anything else on your list tonight?
Oh, yes, I have.
The capital expenditure,
So it's this one?
there we go.
Based on the capital improvement committee, when we met, there were some items, bigger ticket items that we pulled out and possibly being able to finance those. I've listed those on this sheet here and recommending what those payment terms are, whether it's 5 years or 10 years. Typically for plow trucks, we've never done it before, but I would recommend 5 years. You know, the big rescue truck, that would be more of a 10-year capital item. That way you can see, and then any like communications, or software items, we typically do a 5-year term.
The amortization
Amortization.
table is based on a blended rate
Correct.
of about 10% minimum, 10% useful life when you blend it all through.
Right. So if we did 10 years for every single one of these, versus the combined, it's about a $116,000 savings if we do it, structure it with 10 and 5 years. I don't know if you wanted to go down those. I know that was one of the discussions that we had to have, what the future financing is gonna be for next year. So what I'm thinking is to start this, do a 2-year bond anticipation note or ban, that would put us into 2022 would be our first installment. And if you take a look at the second page of this, I have, all of the debt that between the city, the school, the water and wastewater department, you can see when, some of those bonds mature. We do have one, in 2022 for the local roads that it will be retiring. And then we also have the school bond, and then we have a few in the water department as well in the wastewater.
About
And
60, like math is correct, it looks about 60% of it, 60-ish of this is rate driven, you know, water and sewer versus general taxation. So that, obviously, the entire 3 million won't rest on the taxpayers, but the ratepayers as well.
That'd be incredible timing, because as you say, in 2022, we take a little under $800,000 drop in the capital improvement payments, the bond payments, so
Yep.
the 2-year ban will get us there.
Right.
That's,
And some of these projects, like for the rescue truck, I know that it takes probably a year to kind of get it into service.
Yeah.
Not longer.
And
And
realistic.
then I know we're working on that radio communication infrastructure, will probably be a year
Yeah.
project.
The $3 million dollar bond, similar vicinity to this, we just sold in January, was over, what, a 30-month period, similar, you know, takes time to assemble these and order them out, so, which would push the payment out into that timeframe.
And I looked at, advanced rates for an interest rate, and I'm doing it on 4%.
Which
Maybe
is
even a little high for.
Conservative, that's conservative, unless we go to war or something,
And there's possibility for going to public sale, which sometimes that can be cheaper.
yeah.
are we gonna do anything else that would prevent this from being tax exempt sale?
I don't see any private.
We wouldn't get to our, okay.
You're talking private activity? I don't see anything. in-
No, I was seeing under 10,000.
Right, 10 million.
For a smaller shore.
Yeah. And that's per year, right? So we're very comfortable with this level.
Even if you build in our cans, it's still gonna be under that.
Question on the loader pusher with the wings. $19,000. Any reason to finance that for 5 years?
It's an add-on to the other equipment, so it's been, you know, gleaned out of here, but really it's part of a package, isn't it, Lisa?
You'd probably get it cheaper by purchasing it with the loader.
Yeah, and likely that's what you're gonna do, so it's really a component unit of the larger purchase.
Okay.
If it were a truly standalone item, absolutely, for 19,000, you're not gonna go out and bond.
So I just echo what Council Fortier said in terms of what I like about this is that this represents a little over 3 million in capital items that are issues that we need to address at some point. And by taking this approach and looking at it now and planning ahead, we're gonna be in a situation where we have on the books, those dollars are being used. So when it comes time to making the payments, it isn't going to impact the tax rate. And we're able to then address the capital items as a result of that. So I think that is very important and gets us where we need to be without moving the tax rate.
plays catch up from past years.
I think this will go a long ways in terms of bringing the highway department's fleet to a more, you know, midpoint level. I mean, we all remember where the police department was 4 years ago, and the average vehicle mileage was 130,000, Glenn, or something like that. And it's much better today, and I think this will, not only, it'll catch us up quite a bit, put us where we are, in the mainstream where we ought to be.
Lisa,
Yeah.
would either one of these trucks be available for next winter?
There's a whole plethora of different companies I've put together that have ones that could be potentially ready for this winter, whether or not, how quickly we can decide to
Move ahead.
proceed.
Right.
Yes.
Assuming that you get the two trucks, how old would your oldest one in the fleet then be?
So it would be,
2008.
Wow.
if we replace the two oldest, would that be an
All
06?
six.
No, 4, yeah.
Yep.
We still have the 06 of Joe's though, right?
Yeah, but
So we would still have an 11-year-old
We still have
truck.
a
Yeah.
06.
And this isn't the last truck you're gonna purchase in this decade. I mean, it used to be we cash flowed it every year, or a truck or more. But this, again, gives it that bump to put it ahead.
Questions or comments?
I'd like to see that plan on the July budget, July agenda for approval. So we can get the plow trucks coming.
Yeah, we have to get them ordered.
Yep.
We do have a little bit of money, so I don't know, did they take the pot
they might.
Well, it doesn't make the agenda closed, so we could put the money in.
Put it in
So never
June.
mind. Disregard.
Agenda closed at noon today.
Yes, it did.
Do they take goodwill?
Good looks. Moving on. What else do you have, Tammy?
That's all that I have.
That's all I've got too.
Yeah.
Those are the two big items. Then, of course, any discussion the council wants to have on proposed positions.
I have just a quick question. I think you told us Friday, and I don't remember what it was. You got at least a tentative figure as to what the mill
Yep,
rate?
actually, that paperwork's in front of you as well.
So the first column is what we're looking at now.
And again, we can't count our ducks yet, or chickens, I guess you count chickens. Count our chickens yet in terms of what will happen with revenue sharing.
Well,
But I think
yeah,
it's,
I know that.
I think there's reason to be optimistic that we're going to be getting more revenue sharing funds. Statutory adjournment, I believe, is the 19th, which is next Wednesday, which means if they were to finish on the 19th, there's other business beyond the budget they got to take care of. Of course, most sessions, if they start a week, they end a week, so it could be the end of next week before they wrap up. We may know by next Monday night, we may not know, but I think we're going to know shortly thereafter, and we'll know what our revenue picture looks like. But as I said when we submitted the budget, the governor's proposal, I believe, would get the budget down by another 0.5% in that general range, Tammy. It was, I don't have, well, I guess I got it right in front of me, but,
I think it's just over 0.2 of a mil. Because we get 458,000 now, and if she goes from
Yeah.
2% to 3%, that's an extra
yeah.
$230,000, so that's 0.23 mils.
Yeah, in my letter, it says if enacted, these additional revenues would lower the mill rate increase to 2.2 6.26 or 1.43. That doesn't include the school, of course, but that's down the 1.43 versus the proposed 1.98, so that's 0.5% more. And there is also a proposal in the legislature to increase that within the Appropriations Committee, so we'll see where it all ends up. We can't count on anything yet, but it could be more than what the governor's proposing.
$18.92 mils. Right now on a $200,000 house, it's $136 more in taxes than it was last year.
Hold, please.
I'm checking. I have my adding machine, so,
Cell phone.
136. Good job.
Who's the mill rate this year?
You thought I was over here making a phone call or playing games, huh?
Total back the city was,
That doesn't take into account the changes in that insurance that we just went through either, so it's gonna reduce it.
Probably get shot for it.
No lot, but
That'd be kind of fun.
I'm sorry,
Clicking.
up or down?
down.
Did they make changes to the homestead exemption again this year? I saw something about that.
As I understand it, again, this is reported through Maine Municipal, but the appropriations voted in. It's not, the whole budget hasn't been voted on
Right.
yet, but the recommendation was to up the homestead exemption another $5,000, about 100% reimbursement to the municipalities. But again, that's just a proposal, nothing's been decided yet.
Okay.
So how they did that was adjusted the reimbursement to 62.5%.
Right,
So-
right.
So that's how they're making up that 100% of the increase.
Yeah, again, I passed on to you what I got from MMA.
Right.
But there's nothing, the log rolling continues down in Augusta, so until the smoke settles, we don't know what we're going to get. But I do, like I said, I do think there's reasons to be encouraged about the revenue sharing, which would reduce the mill rate.
Mm-hmm. It could also reduce that average price
Yes,
if they increase their homestead exemption.
Yeah,
Correct.
about $95.
Well, that's more than half.
yeah, that's true. That's,
Mr. Phillips, you're shaking your head.
Creeps and creeps and creeps every year.
Well, the only way to stop it from creeping and creeping and creeping every year is to increase our economic development and get bigger taxpayers in here to offset it. Because the cost of doing business and the services we have to provide increase every year too. That's not gonna go away. And there's no way to fund those things unless we have businesses paying the taxes. As opposed to homeowners.
I know.
I know.
I
But
know.
insurance
Lived this
goes up
experience.
and cost of doing business goes up. And with more growth comes more services. So there's cost to that too. So, there's no way to grow and hold fast on costs. The costs are gonna grow, so we've got to figure out a way to make the growth, economic growth, also grow enough to offset some of this, to make up for what we're gonna have in increases. Or the number of homes, the number of taxpayers to spread it out, but the cost growth isn't gonna stop. Unless we go backwards. Which isn't a good plan.
But we also need to look ahead, because also in Augusta, not dead yet, is a local option sales tax.
Yes. Yes.
Ellsworth would
Benefit
smoke that
greatly from that.
because of
Just
our
under
sales.
$400,000 if my Jana's
Yeah,
calculations, I
right.
should say, are correct.
I don't know what the.
Unofficial, of course.
I don't know what the formula is yet, but they're talking about trying to make it fair and send some of that money back to the state, put in a pot and distribute along the same lines as revenue.
15%, but all of that money has to be used towards opioid
Yep. So what-
treatment and
Yeah, so
programs.
what we did, or what Jana did at my request was go back, the last baseline year for taxable sales for foods and food and lodging
2015.
was, I believe, 2014. And so we we inflated that by the amount the general retail sales had increased. Then we took 1% of that and 85% of that,
Okay.
because 15% goes back. And I believe it was about 390,000, somewhere in that range.
Right,
10
4 mils.
Right. You build a lot of roads with that, too.
sure can. And there were options too, proposed options.
Yep.
Where you could impose it seasonally.
Correct,
As opposed
yeah.
to year-round, although I think for Ellsworth, without having thought through it a lot and had a lot of discussions, I would be less inclined to do it seasonally where we're a service center
Yeah.
and there are people using our roads year-round, that it would help some of the, area folks that are coming and going to help us keep up with the roads and stuff as well. But it's just something down the road to look at.
But that's another situation where the council would have to vote to opt in to do it, and under
And it'll all
what
depend on the
circumstances.
circumstances that they
Yeah.
I
propose.
think it was a referendum, wasn't it?
I
Wasn't
can't
it by
remember.
local referendum?
It may
I
very
think
The
well
it
last
be.
one
was.
it was.
I think it was.
And then I'll say what I said a month or two ago, that I think Ellsworth would find the Newport Palmyra paradox come into play, where Walmart told Newport, no, we aren't gonna build here. They went just over the line into Palmyra. And a lot of stuff is built up around it. Between Surrey, Lemoyne, Hancock, Trenton.
That may be the case, but this has Route 1, and it is the traffic way to Acadia. There aren't, those businesses on those outlying
Then in that
towns are
case,
not
you
gonna have the
Hancock
same
and
traffic.
Trenton.
Yeah.
Trenton, yeah,
Yep.
less Hancock.
And,
Lemoyne.
yeah, and as someone once said to me, when's the last time when you went traveling somewhere, you looked on your bill to see how much local taxes you paid? Some of you may have, but I can't remember. Going to Florida,
If they're looking at a 1%, it's gonna,
you know,
it's invisible, Mark.
it's 50 cents on
On
a
food and
50.
lodging.
Food and lodging only.
Yeah, it's only food and lodging.
That's where they start. Once the state gets their meat hooks into taxes, then they'll creep from there.
Yeah. And again, don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because there've been a lot of proposals to do local option sales taxes, and they've all died over the years.
Right.
So this is still probably a heavy lift,
I
but it's
suspect
gotten
this one will
further
die.
than most bills have.
What I liked about it, Mark, was it is a luxury item tax. It isn't like it's on groceries, it isn't like it's on gasoline, it isn't like it's on something that people need every day to live here. So the bulk of it's going to be on folks that are visiting the area. It isn't a property tax, it isn't a forced tax. You can, opt to pay the 1% and eat in a restaurant, or you can opt
Yeah.
to eat at home. Or if you live here, chances are you're not renting a room or a Airbnb.
And it's those using our infrastructure
Using the
that pay
infrastructure.
for it. But again, it's a policy question, and it's been controversial over the years, because evidently, because the local sales option hasn't passed in 30 years I've been around it. So,
Yes, sir.
So, whether that passes or not, for me, it still comes down to the process should still be the same in terms of looking at this budget And one of the things that I think is important for us to be really asking the question is, when there's an increase, you know, there are needs and there are things that, I think everything that's put on the table is fair in terms of being able to justify it, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily rises to the level of needing to be funded, particularly if there is no objective measure by which we're making those decisions. So when I see a new position, if there's not objective information, if the population hasn't increased by a certain percentage or the call volume, those are the things that I think is important to understand in those decision-making in terms of increased costs, because I think we have to make those decisions based on what is needed, objective data, because we do have to manage the increase, and we cannot have a situation where people in this community can't afford to stay in their homes, and we have that responsibility to mitigate that. Sometimes it does mean an increase, but I think we need to do due diligence around very much questioning all requests. Are they absolutely critical or not? And if they're not, then we shouldn't support them. So I think we have to go through that process, and I certainly want to do that with some of the positions that are being proposed in some of the departments, and to talk about that a little bit in more depth.
Yeah. And I would comment that in the manager's budget, we only proposed one new full-time position in the water department and 2 part-time positions mowing in the highway department. Department heads in their budget requests, particularly fire and police, have requested new positions, which it's obviously the council's prerogative to, you know, to add to the budget, and but that's where we're at, and department heads are here tonight to discuss it and answer your questions and get whatever additional information you need.
Kick it off.
So the seasonal positions for the mowing, not a huge expense, but I question, here we are at the end of June, the reality of, are we going to really hire anybody to take on those tasks? It's seasonal, and then it goes away, and then we're in the same position next year.
Yep.
And it's this cycle of budgeting for something that doesn't come about. So I have a question about whether that really is a realistic proposal for us. I understand the reason behind it, I just don't see it playing itself out based on the way it's structured.
I think the problem without starting it is it won't start.
Right.
So whether they can find somebody to hire or not, if we don't fund it, next year, we're gonna be facing the same issue. Instead of being able to prepare for it in March or April and start trying to get somebody in line, the money won't be there, the budget won't be there. So if it doesn't happen this year, that money won't be spent, it'll still remain in the budget, and then next year, when it comes time again, then they will have the ability to plan for it a little more, a little earlier than this. That's the problem with removing that, because you're gonna kill something, and then that overburdens that department tremendously with some menial work. It really does. It's been an ongoing issue where we don't have a Parks and Recreation or anyone to control that, and this just continues to go and go and go. And we've got skilled laborers with a fairly high pay scale riding around on a lawnmower with a weed whacker, which is insane. We keep doing it over and over again.
So I guess why aren't we looking at contract versus hire in terms of?
I thought we looked at both and determined that the hiring was a more cost-effective.
That was my understanding.
I thought when we ran through that, that was the
Yep.
determination.
Two things, if I can speak. First off, I did look into the option of potentially hiring. At this point in time, everybody I contacted said no, because they're having a hard time hiring people, and they're already booked up with lawns that they have. So that was only a handful of people. I'm sure there might be a couple, there could be more. But first was, no one was really particularly interested. Secondly, I'm on board with John's thought is, even if it doesn't happen now because it is late in the season and the college kids already have their jobs for the summer, if we fund this, or at least partially fund it so that come April, May, when the college kids are getting out of school, I'm already looking for these positions, then it's funded on that back end to get it started, in the hope that you would redo it again in the next budget, you know what I mean? So it gets started. And that's the idea, is to find some, highway can do the front end and the back end, for, first couple months before the kids get out, and the last couple of months when they go back to school. But to do that big chunk of time in the middle, it just doesn't make sense for us to keep doing it, because it is high-paying labor doing menial work, and then
And
add
limited
into
to
it-
8 to 5, Monday through Friday, or not 8 to 5, but whatever your hours are.
And then the other thing is, it's taxing just on its own, but highway guys are basically not allowed to take vacation in the winter, because they have to plow. So the majority of them take the vacation in the summertime. So by the time you add in vacations, and then 2 people mowing, and it just trickles down to, we're down to no crew, or not enough crew to do all the things we really need to do. Having 2 people doing the mowing gives me at least 2 more guys back on any given day, because the mowing has to happen, no matter how many show up. You know what I mean? The mowing, there always has to be at least 1 or 2 mowing every single day. So if I had those 2 positions that are already on their own, then I have a crew back. Does that make sense?
That's,
And part of this appropriation, were it to go forward, would also pay for next June.
You could carry the funds forward. If we didn't
Yep.
spend, it's really more the authorization than just the funding at this point, because this is the same vicious cycle we get into on ordering trucks. When you don't have authorization till July 1, and you're trying to get something for November 15th or whatever, it's just the vagaries of a municipal year. I don't have a good answer for that either, Dale, other than we got to get into the ball game at some point if we're going to do it. And I think part of the problem with contracting is you're paying overhead, to that contractor to provide the mowing service, and that's fine. But if we could get out and hire some part-time people on our own, I just think it would be more economical just to do it directly.
When we do the courtesy boat inspections out at Branch Green Lake, we do have a lot of college age and even high school age kids that are interested in that job. And if this isn't that job necessarily, but it's the same idea, is if we're in position to get it out there for the kids early enough, that they know it's coming, then maybe we have a shot of actually getting them.
And this, not permanent employment, right? This is just year to year. We
Yeah,
don't have to
yeah.
hire people back the next year.
And that's what, same thing at the boat launches, a lot of the kids come back for the 4 years they're in college, they'll come back every summer. And they're both great jobs, you're outside, you're in the sun, you're enjoying the weather.
I think that, as you've indicated, the important thing is to get the most efficient use out of your highway crew as possible. And I do know that there's a lot of projects that you need to get done. So I would support doing this. And if you had to resort to contracting for a month or something like that, if it will help to get something else finished, I think it'd be worth it.
And if the market changes next year and contractors are hungry, maybe we revisit it. But then at least we have the authorization and the funding to do it.
We've looked into using contractors several times in the past, and it usually came out to be a phenomenal amount of money. There's a huge,
And no control.
a limited control.
These kids that would include Knowlton Park.
I believe that the ultimate proposal would be that it would also include Knowlton Park, the mowing portion of it, yes.
Not the pest
Treatment.
control, the
Right.
treatments, that would.
Because right now, the contract is it's either $27,000 to $28,000 a year.
That sounds about
For
right.
everything. I don't know what it is broken down.
Yeah.
But I would assume mowing would lessen that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
reduced it by 10,000.
I mean, there's 10 grand that would go to those wages right off the top. Any other thoughts?
We've got to find something because the existing system's broken. When you get City Hall on a 14-day rotation, it looks crappy for the last 6 days. And in order to keep that 14-day rotation, they have to shave it. We've got to find a better way that we can have people mow on days that are good for mowing, not on Monday through Friday.
And evenings.
Right, right.
Sun's out till 8:30.
There are mornings that you get a heavy dew, that it clogs up. Okay. Work from 11 o'clock until 8 o'clock. I mean,
It feels to me like this is where this whole discussion and conversation started, and we asked the director for a proposal to rectify this, and she brought this forward, and to me, it sounds like a solid, good plan. I don't think we have a better one being offered or proposed. It's not a commitment for a lifetime. It's just, let's see if this works, if this meets our needs. I say we give her the funding to do this so she can utilize her skilled labor better in a way that they're intended for at the price that they're being paid, and revisit it next year or the following year and see if it's working and making sense for us.
I agree.
But we have road work needs to get done. These people need to be not mowing lawns,
We've seen the list.
right?
Yeah.
So let's employ them with the roads and get someone else to push a mower or ride a mower.
understanding that we may be stuck with what we got this year
Yeah.
because of inability to find
Right,
people.
but this will
we're
give her-
taking this step
It'll
forward.
give her a chance to make it work for us next year, and then we can come back to it and see if it's meeting the needs.
The money's not going anywhere. You know, if if it isn't all spent this year, it can be carried forward and set against next year.
Lisa, do you know off the top of your head approximately what the hourly wage is for these part-timers?
At highway, is that what you said?
No, for the mowers.
For the mowers.
I think it was either somewhere in the 14, 15 range,
Yeah.
I think is what we did.
Yep.
I don't know what exactly. But,
There aren't any high school kids that want 14, 15 bucks an hour that are that hungry for it?
oh, there may be.
Yeah.
She's just saying she didn't get it
We're
out
not-
fast enough
We
and
don't have
kids have
authority to go out
jobs.
and,
Wow.
We haven't told her she can go do it, so she
Yeah.
has no trigger to pull.
Walmart starts at 14.
I'd rather be mowing.
Me too.
yeah. And the flexibility is a big deal too, because if I'm a college kid and I can go out and mow on Sunday or Saturday or evening, Wednesday evening, as opposed to our highway workers who are on a fixed schedule and have a lot of other things to do.
So I'm not against this proposal.
I heard you.
This, however, is what I think is important for any type of increase, is the discussion, because the presentations from the departments are one thing. Before we take a final vote, I just think it's important to air that out. Sometimes that's a quick conversation, sometimes it'll be more in-depth, and that's what I was trying to get at in terms of just understanding and putting out all the issues so that it weighs into the final decision, and it's clear to whoever's here in attendance, but also outside of this room, so that we're not just passing based on a presentation without any discussion around an increase. So, thank you.
So we did okay?
You did okay for me.
Okay. What's the next one you want to tackle?
Everything, keep going.
Well, the water department's the other full-time position. I don't know if you want to, Reggie's here, and Lisa from Public Works and the water department.
I read with interest that information, but if we're truly gonna go forward with the radio meter reading program, at least in the short-term bump, you're gonna have to have that person to implement the program. And then reassess it later, after
Yep.
the program's in place.
And from my
And it
understanding.
doesn't come from tax dollars.
No, it comes from
User
ratepayers.
fees.
And from what I understood, Reggie, too, there's more and more demands on the water warden's time to be, he's pitched in a lot of times in the past, and less dependency on that. Anything you want to add, either Lisa or Reggie, about the position in terms of the justification for it?
Even after we get this meter reading thing in place, I assure you I can keep this individual busy for the next 20 years. Sorry, I'm still here. There are things just that keep stacking up that I can keep everyone busy.
And your volume is growing and going to be growing, right? As Jackson Lab ramps up, new housing developments, new restaurants, other things going on. So your trajectory is, I would assume, pretty good right now.
So is the wear and tear on equipment will increase.
Yep,
Chemicals will increase.
yep.
And this position alone isn't going to drive a rate change,
Yeah. I don't see that happening.
so that's important.
We are doing we are planning to do a rate case study this year. So it's not gonna drive one,
Right.
but it'll be taken into the
Yeah.
whole
Just in case, I'm not sure everybody heard you when you said we're planning to do a rate,
rate case
Case
study.
study.
I don't know if they heard the word study, so,
Rate case study.
okay.
Yeah.
See where we're at.
That's,
Putting that out there.
that's PUC speak, because water is regulated by the state, sewer isn't, correct? I mean, other than environmentally, but the rates are monitored, so whatever you do would need to go through the PUC, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. But we're doing the same thing on the the wastewater side, looking at capital needs, operating needs, growth in the community, trying to figure out what would be there as well, because as you see on the capital list, the Water Street project is going to be significant. There's a request in there for a back truck. That's wastewater, right? And such. So, even though they're not general taxation, they're still Ellsworth people paying the bill, and they will follow that with great interest as well.
All right, since you mentioned it, vac truck,
Yep.
let's talk vac truck. $400,000. That's a lot of money.
Yep.
Is the council
He's
comfortable?
not convinced me for as many
No.
times as Mike has stood here and done his dance. They've survived for years, they hire it out. That's a huge amount of
Yeah.
money.
Certainly, the function is on the table because we need the service. It's still a question as to whether or not we buy the truck or hire out the service,
As we have in the past.
as we've had in the past. And those cost-benefit analyses will go on. It's on the table at this point because one way or the other, either through a third party or by our own means, we've got to address it.
And if I'm not mistaken, the charges in the past where we've hired it out have not approached the cost of a truck. Is that correct?
All right.
So when you look at a cost like that, though, obviously, the 400,000, when you compare that to a contract, what's the life of a vac truck?
That I don't know.
Well, 10
Lisa?
years? So you're looking at 10 years of costs, and that's what you have to compare and analyze. You know, you have to assume if we're not contracting, then whatever the cost
Yeah.
is times the useful life of this piece of equipment is what you're comparing, not
Right.
400,000 this year.
Operating a life cycle analysis.
But I'm not sure why it's on the table for consideration if we don't have that information. If we haven't done that study
Again,
and we don't understand
that-
fully what the analysis is, we shouldn't be approving a purchase.
Just to qualify it, I think it's on the table because the capital budgeting committee did this in parallel with the budget, but this is I don't believe you're making a decision on that as part
It's
of
for
this
future
budget.
financing.
This is,
Okay.
these decisions will happen into the future.
All right.
Well, also what we have to look at is what maintenance items are we not doing because we don't have a sucker truck?
Right.
How many more motels do we have to flood the sewage back up before we get the hint that we need an aggressive maintenance on our sewer mains?
Yeah,
And Gary, how do you know where to go?
He has a plan.
yeah.
Quick
Well,
question.
whether or not you're paying a lump sum for a machine or you're paying over time through a lease, the cost will be there one way or the other, but we're at the point where we're growing and we need a more systematized maintenance program where we, say, flush out the lines every 3 years or whatever Lisa makes sense, right? And that's gonna require more effort than it has in the past.
The goal is to basically do a third of the system every year, so every 3 years, the entire system's been cleaned.
Currently, is there an average of how many times we use back truck services?
I don't have those figures, Lisa.
Any idea?
We can get that.
Not as often as it should.
No.
I mean, is it like 3 times?
I don't know. I know they do the yearly cleanup of the pump stations, and outside of that,
Yeah.
I don't have it off the top of my head.
Any idea what the cost is when we hire it out?
I'm
I mean,
gonna
on an
guess
average.
Based on, I'm gonna guess 25 to 35,000 is my guess a year.
But that's not doing the plan that we need to be doing for maintenance. That's just doing the
What we've
the
done in
plant
past.
and wherever else we might have had an issue that we knew of. But
Some
that
of
does
it's
not
troubleshooting,
That does not
right.
include the third, the upkeep, what we should be doing for
Right.
for regular
Right.
maintenance, PMs.
Yeah, this goes beyond
Guaranteed
troubleshooting, this is
it'll require an extra
systematic
man.
maintenance.
Systematic is
It'll be operating cost.
75, 80 would be my guess.
Yeah,
In this contract.
The good thing is, we don't have to decide this tonight. That's,
No.
that's a capital plan that we're gonna talk about at
Bingo.
the
right.
July meeting, so we can get that
Plan
information
again.
Yeah.
for us.
But like I said, you're gonna be paying for this one way or the other, whether it's through annual lease payments or service payments or a lump sum and own your own machine. It's just what's the better life cycle investment, as you pointed out, Don.
So we're not buying the truck tonight.
No,
Nope.
So probably when that's
No.
proposed, we better have these items with us.
yeah.
Anything else in the budget?
And that vac truck does a wicked good job picking up leaves on the side of the road.
Yes, it does. The video would seem to
Yeah,
indicate,
I mean,
It does.
Definitely lease, contract.
$400,000 for a leaf vacuum.
Mm.
Better be good.
Think of all the storm sewer work you would save us.
Anything else in the budget you want to bring up for discussion? I knew you'd have something.
Well, I'm waiting,
Go ahead.
if somebody else wants to go.
I'll bring up one. We had questions last Friday about the local roads. Did we all get an opportunity to overview the information that our Public Works Director sent us? As to what her projects are for that $700,000?
That was 500,000. Was
Hey.
it 500,000?
The
First
first,
plan is 5, the budget was 7.
yeah, and in fairness to Lisa, this process every year is our budget director, Tammy, over here saying, Lisa, you need to hold back some funds, because every year, there's these projects we don't count on, so it's just prudent planning. But she could fund the entire 700,000 and then again, without any problem, and do a lot of worthy projects.
Basically, that's why I stuck, when I sent my email, I stuck right around 500,000, knowing that we were proposing 700, so that 200 was kind of,
Reserve.
The surprises,
The
the
surprise
things that
money.
come up.
The manhole and this intersection of Man
Yeah.
High, those things.
And that's maintenance paving,
Yeah.
no road rebuilds. And the $500,000 is simply maintenance paving.
right.
It's got nothing to do with any kind of a road reconstruction at all.
Nope, it's maintenance, it's capital maintenance.
That's right.
Well, over the years, we've whittled down the local roads budget quite a lot. and this year the roads, there's some bad places out there.
You
Yeah,
could
particularly
easily
bad
spend
roads.
$1 million a year and justify it.
Yeah.
We have a lot of roads in this community. It's a challenge. Every community is challenged on this, not just us, but that 700,000 will be very well spent. Every penny of it.
I'm just gonna go on record as saying this is why I'm in favor of the 1% tax. It helps repair roads that are not used by Ellsworth citizens necessarily all the time, but also folks visiting the area. I think it's,
Yeah,
Keep in mind when a light goes down, and we've got to fund it, like the $25,000
For the camera.
for the camera, that came out of local roads, right? Right, Tammy? And that wasn't budgeted, but it had to happen, or come 4th of July, it was going to get really busy around that light.
Gridlock.
Yeah, I'm on that list.
All right, let me bring up one for discussion. Since I received a bunch of emails in the last 3 or 4 days, and I think we all did. The library.
I received one.
Any thoughts on that?
Danny, you're so
I don't dare
chatty.
raise my hand anymore.
Right ahead now.
Even if you don't, I'm gonna call on you.
I know. Well, I brought it up at the end of the last meeting, so I want to start there with what I said. And I had a chance this week to follow up with Amy and have some conversation. The discussions that have happened, I think it's important to state that the discussion is not about doing away with the library, harming the library, not wanting the library. The discussions are that as a city, we pay quite a bit to operate the library. And when you look at it on a per member basis, that certainly plays out. It is a regional library. It serves lots of communities. And so the discussion has been about trying to find that balance of how do you sustain and maintain a high quality library while also achieving the opportunity to reduce the impact for taxpayers. And if we can find a way to do both, that's a win-win. And there shouldn't be any concerns about having that kind of a discussion to see if there are options. Maybe there are, maybe there aren't. But if we don't talk about it, it will continue to be the discussion that everybody has had and everybody has heard about one side or the other, fund the library at its current level, cut the library, and it's an ongoing discussion, and that is not a recipe for a win-win. That just ultimately will result in some constituency not being happy with it. So that's why I wanted to bring it forward, because I think there's value in having the discussion, having the opportunity to do that. My personal belief is that I think there may be opportunities if the city didn't run the library, that could the library then have other means of generating revenue? Maybe yes, maybe no, but that's the part of kind of exploring it. So what I would like to propose is that we go in and create an intentional process by which we have, by fall, we have a workshop, invite the discussion. That late fall, we have a work group that's working to look at these options. I also think that it might be value to have a consultant to look at analyzing what that would look like if the city didn't operate it, in terms of both from a cost analysis and potential opportunities, so that we have facts to base decisions on, and ultimately be able to make an informed decision. So that's where I would come out in terms of looking at this issue, because I think it's important that we discuss it, and I'm concerned that the alternative will result in something that is not as desirable as some other potential options.
I think without using a consultant, we're going to be shooting in the dark. We're, as far as I know, no one here on the council, or I don't think any of us have the expertise to know exactly what you said, Dale, whether it's a good move in whatever direction. We have to have somebody help us to determine that.
And certainly, I don't know, Amy has anything that she wants to share, but might.
Oh, by all means, Amy.
Sure, well, I'll just add to the library trustees, as most of you know, we presented this at a finance committee meeting, are moving forward with a plan to try to solidify the support from the surrounding communities. We do receive funding from many of the municipalities that surround Ellsworth, so just trying to bolster that support by charging residents of non-supporting towns. So if the town does opt not to support the library, there would be a cardholder fee. And I think that's one step in the direction of diversifying our revenue sources and trying to get toward more equity in our funding. We certainly understand that it's a challenging fiscal environment for a lot of municipalities, so we're working toward that model. And I think it does take some time. And I mean, our overall budget is down for fiscal year 20, and we were able to reduce the share of the Ellsworth appropriation a little bit more than what we reduced. Our overall budget is basically level funded, and the City of Ellsworth appropriation is down 2%. So we're looking at, again, it's a small step forward, but we're diversifying our funding and keeping the appropriation first. So I think trustees are hearing that feedback and certainly want to have an open process. And I'm happy to answer specific questions about the budget or any other thoughts or feedback about the diversification issue.
What has been the reaction of the towns you've talked with so far?
We haven't gotten a huge amount of feedback. We know at least one town probably will opt not to fund the library, but they already don't fund us. So most of the other towns we hope will support the full funding request going forward. I've just heard from a couple of select board members from various towns who have questions, but no, we haven't presented those funding requests yet, and it won't take effect until July 1st, 2020, so we're still a year out from getting that specific feedback about those requests.
So this town that has opted not to fund the library, do you, off the top of your head, do you know approximately how many of those residents hold library cards?
A little over 100 cardholders from that town. And I will say too that I think what we're hearing more from the residents from those towns than we are from the select boards or budget committees. So I think that's the next step, is just educating the public, the people who use our library, about how the library is funded. Because I think the average person, even if they're a really active library user, they don't think about
Why would
where
they?
the funding comes from.
Right. And I think, like we spoke before, I think that's going to be your biggest advocacy in this, is when their voters of those communities go to their selectmen and say,
Yep.
you know, that their ears are tuned to that audience, not to this audience, right? So I think I think it'll serve you well.
Right. And we
If
did
you have a
talk
chance
about-
of being served well by it.
We also talked about collaborating with city council to, if there's a way to jointly present those funding requests to
Mhm.
the towns to just carry a little bit more weight. That's part of the conversation too. And presenting it as a, we're developing regional library services, we're working with our towns, and this is the service you receive in exchange for this funding.
Amy, what's the per person cost that you're presenting to the surrounding towns?
It's a per capita fee, and the trustees have to decide exactly what it will be. They haven't settled on an amount. The current thinking is that it might be prorated based on distance, because we do serve some towns that are 40-45 minutes away, and then other towns that are right next to Ellsworth. So with the thinking that it's more convenient for the towns that are closer, and we do have more cardholders from those towns than we do the towns that are further away. So it might be a 3-tiered system, trying to keep it as simple as possible, but also make it fair and equitable for the towns that are able to make use of our services.
If I recall the number from last year, the Ellsworth resident, their cost to use the library, I believe it was $84 a person.
I think,
Is that
right now I think it's around 70 per capita.
about 70?
Yeah. And it is going down. We've reduced the city bus appropriation.
And would the fee to an out-of-town resident approach that?
Likely not. Right now, it's much lower for the surrounding towns, so we can't. It's up to the trustees, certainly that's not my decision,
Right.
but, so we want to work with those towns and we've talked about, could we even include the city of Ellsworth per capita rate in the messaging we present to those towns, so they understand that, certainly Ellsworth taxpayers are putting a lot of bills, so we're asking for a cash share. But that's an ongoing conversation, is what that rate should be for the towns.
But the Ellsworth taxpayer, to me anyway, when they find out they're paying 70 some odd dollars and the out-of-town resident is paying substantially less than that, that's when I start getting emails and phone calls. And it's hard to explain.
I think that's, trustees recognize that that's that's an equity issue that we're trying to address and again, trying to diversify the county. So as most of you know, many of these towns are very small towns with tax rates that are lower than Ellsworth, so I think that, we have to make a case for those towns and a lot of them, they see the library as an Ellsworth resource, and so we're trying to present it and shift the conversation to, this isn't just a charitable contribution they're making to our library, this is a fee for service. So we need to focus on that messaging a little bit more. And I will say it's a challenge. It's a 5-member board of trustees, and we're presenting to 18 different towns, and they're going to all these town meetings that are happening at various times throughout the year. So they do a lot of work, and I think they're taking a really positive step forward, but it's a process.
Could I just interject, having attended many of these
You may.
town meetings, that to the article in the American and discussions, the feedback that we are getting, the residents of many of these communities did not realize that their town was not supporting the library because they don't attend the town meetings. And as Amy stated prior to this, we've had many, many people inquire as to what they can do, who do they contact in their community, and 2 of the town meetings that gave us the full amount that haven't, because people have been contacting their budget committees and whatnot, because they were simply unaware that this was not happening. And so we are getting some positives from even the discussions that have been happening. So hopefully we have more to go, but we are, as trustees, continuing to change the format that we're going to be dealing with these communities. Unfortunately, they do see it as not a service, and that's what is needed.
Thank you, Ann.
Amy, what's the availability of grants? Is there a lot of grant writing?
We do receive quite a few grants. Most of the grants are not for operational funds, the grants out there for libraries. A lot of them are programming funds, so we do get a lot to supplement the educational and recreational programming that we offer. We don't actually get any city money for programs. We fundraise for all or grant write for all of those. We're certainly continuing to do research on grants, but yeah, most libraries in Maine are either locally funded or they're funded through fundraising or endowments. So that's part of the challenge. There's not a lot of additional funding out there for certainly for operational costs.
And as we move down this road, that's one of the reasons I thought it was so important for us to look at a consultant and for somebody who knows this. They don't. They have a way of doing business. Our library has done it forever. This is the way it's been done, and that they're not, they don't have the experience or the programming in their minds on this other model of doing business. So I think that if we decide this is a road, after we talk to a consultant, to move down, that we need to find ways to support them in that model. If we're asking for a shift, or we want to help them with a shift, then we need to be willing to put the resources forward needed to help them make that shift. It's not, what they've done.
It's an interesting scenario in which we lived through with that. And you go into those smaller towns that are basically competing with us for residential services. And I've heard countless times in the last few years of all the outlying towns with their lower mill rates, they don't have anything. We're sitting here supporting the library, which all their residents enjoy, with our mill rate up, trying to support that, and they're happy as can be with a 9 or 10 mill rate and saying, oh, it's wonderful. But they don't have anything to offer other than a safe, nice place to live that's has no library, has no police, and it reads well in the paper. How expensive it is here.
Mark?
Got a hand up
Oh, I'm
over
sorry.
Just to counter that, I'm Rebecca Lehman, and I was a trustee for 9 years a while ago. And I used to go up to Great Pond to go to their town meeting, all 4 of us. And they always overpay because they appreciate what the library provides so much. And I think that we need to make sure that that stays as part of the discussion as well. That they would say, how much you're requesting, it was $110 or something, and they would say, give her $150. We love that library,
Yeah,
So I think that's important to keep in mind.
that is important, but I think you'll find they're in the minority, aren't they? Most of the other ones are pretty frugal at times.
Yes.
So I just want to state what I think is the obvious, but just to make sure it's out there, is that whether it's city-run, continued city-run, or whether it's its own entity, the city can still contribute in either scenario to the extent that that council determines. So it's not going down that road and exploring it does not mean that all of a sudden the city isn't going to, the library isn't going to have the funding and the support. So I just think that's important, that this isn't, I don't see this as a funding decision first. I see this as what are the opportunities going forward to accomplish both goals and to see if that can work.
Amy, getting back to the grants for a minute that Heather asked about. Are more grants available if it's a private library versus a public library? Do you know?
I'm not aware of any grants that are to libraries that are specific based on your structure. And we do receive, the one grant, there are grants that are based on the size of the population you serve, and that wouldn't change if we continue to serve all of the surrounding towns. There's some grants we don't qualify for because of our size, but for the most part, yeah, grants are fully available to nonprofit and municipal libraries.
And aren't most libraries organized as 501c3s?
In Maine, it's about 50-50, so it's a split between municipal and.
That's what I meant, where you're nonprofit, you're a 501c3.
About half of the libraries in Maine.
Which most foundations want that kind of a route, so I think it's almost equivalent being municipal or a 501c3.
Amy, I think he meant if they're not a municipally
Right.
run, then they would be a 501c.
Right, right.
I
Right.
think that's what he meant to say,
Yes.
but not meaning all of them are.
You speak, David. Thank you.
But the fun part is a contribution, either one is still tax deductible.
Right, exactly. And that's the key here, because if you got private donors, they want to be able to deduct it.
Right.
That's pretty much automatic if it's a 501c3.
Right, and we also have
Or
a Friends of the
municipality.
Library group.
Or
which is
municipality.
501c3 that does fundraising for us as well.
Right.
Contributing for donations.
Smart, too, by the way.
Anything further?
To the library, or
Take your pick.
we had discussions about the fire department and the police department asking, and they're here sitting on the floor tonight, and we received some information. I'm not sure, we should probably discuss that with Chief Mosher and Chief Tucker here. Might want to give the last pitch.
You want to begin the discussion?
Chief Mosher, your additional man is to help cover vacant spots that you can't fill or lean shifts. Can you refresh us to why?
I can. And actually, I've got a heck of a deal for you today. Because what would
All
be
right.
a fiscal year in the police department without
Thank you very
more
much.
officer shortages? So, without going
Thank
into
you, Wayne.
specifics, I was notified today that by the first of the fiscal year, I will be down an officer, so I will have a vacancy. So,
By
The reality of
by the
my
first
meetings-
of the upcoming fiscal year?
by July 1st, yes. So the reality of my world is that in order for me to get an officer trained and on the road filling shifts, you're looking at a minimum of a year between, unless the rare occasion that we're able to find somebody who's already trained. And as we saw with Levi, that costs a lot of money too. So, and that happens few and far between. So the reality of me, we have a July academy starting up, which is, for all intents and purposes, is outside of the realm of possibility, because we can't possibly get someone through the process for July. So we're looking at a December academy to fill any vacancy. So the vacancy that we're going to be having right off soon is a long-term employee. He's at the top step in our pay scale. Will more than likely be being replaced by a very bottom of the pay scale employee, which leaves us with my current balance, if we replace him in come January, of a $10,000 surplus between the pay scale of the very top and the very bottom employee. So if you do the math and you've got a $10,000 pay scale, and you add this new position, you've got a $10,000 surplus, and you add a new position, which would give me, so I'd be out in the market trying to find 2 officers, which, by the way, is not easy, but we'd be looking to possibly put 2 people in the January academy, well, December academy starts in the end of December. And that second position would come at a mere cost to the city of approximately $12,000 if you funded it for just half the year. So that's the bargain basement going rate for a police officer for 2020.
Did you practice this all day?
Wow, he has that.
That way, that way.
Punch drunk because I've been up since 4 o'clock. But the reason I want to propose, or I'm bringing that forward, is because of the reality of the situation where it takes so long for me to get a person up and running. And so if I have this vacancy that I'm talking about right now, and we put someone in the academy in January, you're talking May before they graduate, you're talking at least end of summer, August, September,
Training.
before they're through training and a productive officer on their own. So if we fund a half-year position for the new position that I requested in my budget this year, that's gonna give me that additional officer, but we're talking about, this time, well beyond this time. We're talking about late summer of next year before that new officer's up and running, plus the officer who we're going to be replacing. But to answer your question more directly, Counselor, is yes, the position that I budgeted for is not a position to really bolster our staffing. It's really just to fill in the gaps. Because we have vacancies now, we have staffing issues now where we're frequently running with two patrol officers on a shift. And if we go down an officer, we have absolutely no option but to fill those shifts with overtime. So by adding and bolstering our staff by an additional officer, we can utilize that person and that additional staffing to help kind of reduce the amount of time that we're running with such a skeleton crew. I mean, frequently, again, we're running with 2 officers on the road. We try to maintain a staffing level of 3 during normal business hours and into the evening hours and midnight, 2 o'clock. Then we go down to 2 in the early morning hours because the call volume just doesn't mandate more than that. But we really try to maintain that 3-person staffing level, and quite honestly, for the last, well, for close to the last year, it's been virtually impossible to do that on a consistent basis, even with excessive overtime, because of our staffing levels, because we have people injured, we have people out, we have unfilled vacancies for extended periods of time, and even when we fill vacancies, the training process is such that it takes so long to get those individuals up and running, that we have a body, but we don't have the capacity of a full officer filling those shifts.
And Chief, isn't it, did I hear that the academy is adding a third?
They are. They've added a third.
Just because of the demand for new police officers to go through the training?
So we've been very fortunate in the past few with all of our employees that we've sent. We've started every single academy, since I've been chief, every single academy class that we've sent a cadet through, we've started on the wait list. We've started with a John Doe in excess of 100. And they only take 60, well, they've been taking 66. And every single time, we've managed to get our John Doe officer in just at the last minute by the skin of our teeth. But we've been able to continue that, been very fortunate with doing that. So with the upcoming academy, you can put in for John Doe's positions for the next academy class at 12:01 on the night of the class that's starting. So July, I think 29th is the start date for the academy that's coming up. And so at 12:01, I can put in for John Doe slots for that academy class that's starting in late December. And the earlier I do it, the sooner I do it, the better likelihood that I'm gonna actually get my candidates into that academy class. So that's a little bit of insight into it. So they added a third academy class to try and accommodate all of the agencies who are getting bumped, who have been bumped in the recent past. And I think it will have some positive impact for that, but they don't know going forward if they're going to be able to continue to maintain that, or if it's just gonna be a 1 or 2 year deal where they kind of get caught up and then go back to just running the 2 classes.
How many vacancies do you have in the department right now?
I have 0 vacancies.
Okay,
I have 3 officers out on extended sick leave.
okay.
And one of those officers who's been out on extended sick leave will not be coming back, so. But
Retiring.
that's, so that I will have 1 vacancy.
Okay.
So you're putting in a pitch tonight for 1 or 2?
Well, the one is just to replace, so.
The
no,
retiring one.
Right, what I'm pitching tonight is that rather than funding an entire position for this entire fiscal year, that would go unused, because I'm not going to be able to put somebody in the July academy. The soonest I'll be able to get anyone into the academy is gonna be the end of December. I think it's like right around Christmas that the second academy starts.
And that would put them on their own in a cruiser by themselves, not until next August.
That's right.
September,
Yep.
probably. yeah.
But it would be a fully funded position after that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Right, it would be embedded in the budget structurally
Yeah.
after that.
So right now, he's looking for half a policeman.
For this current budget.
Well, his punch drunk pitch, kind of meandered a little bit.
Yeah, no.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
He's also very good at the shell game. But I understand it, and I support the half funding. I think he's got a good plan.
I think it's needed. You start, it's a strange world now, and if you start having trouble filling shifts with your type of work, it just leads to some pretty horrendous situations at times.
Not only does it lead to situations where you can't sufficiently man the police force, but you also risk burning out the police officers that you do have when they're continuously always having to work so much overtime to man posts. Or you don't call them posts, what do you call them? Shifts.
So first of all, the other department heads, I think you've set a new bar for presenting in terms of.
Congratulations.
Richard, you're gonna have to do a dance and stuff. You should have led.
I should have had brownie.
Well, yes and no.
So I support what you're talking about. The one question though, and in terms of, do we need to account for some additional overtime through the fall, where you're going to be making up for not only that vacancy, but it sounds like a couple others. So should we account for that in the budget and not just budget a part-time position? Because I think we're
Right.
going to end up going over.
Absolutely.
And that,
See from this
frankly,
perspective.
the last
Sure
4 or
sounds it.
5 years, and I don't know before that, but it's almost a given every year because this is a problem. Every police department right now,
We throw a dart at a number for overtime,
right?
and I don't think we've come close
Right.
yet.
Well, and the other
Is it still-
benefit of adding a little bit in overtime is you have some funds in there if we are fortunate enough to find a trained person in order to cover that purchase of that education.
That's what I was gonna suggest as well, just
Yeah.
putting a little bit in there, in case we did find somebody, because what was it,
35,000?
that we had to pay?
They've upped the amount. It
It's
used to be-
40,000 for a 1 year, anyone that's been
Right.
out less than a year. And then it gets prorated every year afterwards.
They amortize it over 5 years, but it was 25,000, they upped it to 40
It
or
was
30.
30.
30 and they upped it to 40. So it's not cheap, but still worth it. And I think the big point is that you're describing this person as a utility player, using a baseball analogy. They're gonna do a little bit of everything as opposed to adding another route or whatever.
No, well, yeah, I mean, what we'll look to do is we'll look to rework our schedule so that with that additional person, assuming we ever get to full staffing levels, right? I mean, right now, I'm looking, you give me a person, I'm gonna plug them into a current vacancy because I've had somebody out on extended sick leave. But assuming we get to full staffing level, we have that person to bolster areas where we currently have high call volume and we, and then that way, if we have a person who is out sick, or we have a person who's on vacation, I can manipulate the schedule, manipulate that person into filling some of these shifts to help alleviate some of that overtime. Many of you who have been on the council for a while would refer to it as the floater positions that Chief DeLeo had for many years. Not really selling it as a floater position because I'm not going to utilize it entirely in that sense. And our contract has actually been worded in such, we have to give them so much time before we change their schedule and so forth, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. But the fact of the matter is that person would be utilized, yes. It's not gonna be plugged in necessarily to a specific shift. When they're not needed in other places, they would be working in a specific shift to help with the, high call volume times. And then when we can and it's foreseeable, we would, reroute their schedule to help offset some of that expenditure with the overtime. So, I mean, that would be the thought process, but again, you're talking, a year away. Best case scenario, you're talking a year away, and that's barring any other vacancies and any other, significant injuries to my workforce. So, it's kind of a moving target all the time. I mean, you plug one extra, you plug what you think is gonna be an extra person in,
Right.
and ultimately, they're just filling somebody else's spot.
We also, Tammy's out of the room, but make sure we got enough in there to cover the final payout of the senior officer. He must have some sick time built up, pent up, but just, I don't know what it is, just make
Yeah.
sure,
Well,
so that doesn't
Yes.
blindside us.
We've discussed that,
Yep.
absolutely.
Chief, I think you have us convinced.
Oh, you haven't checked with Dale yet.
I'm sorry?
You haven't checked with Dale yet.
I think Dale already
Dale hasn't
said
really
that.
weighed in. Oh, yeah.
I think Dale already said that.
Yeah, he signed on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, check with who? I can't hear that name.
Thank you, Chief. Great job.
Okay. Brought the heat tonight.
Chief Topper.
Your turn.
Yep.
And I want to echo a lot of what he just said is what I'm going to say to you.
Ditto.
In many ways, it's a very similar situation. I gave you guys a document that compared us against many other departments around the state. And in many ways, there's a lot of similarities in that document, and in many ways, there's a lot of differences. Some of the things that I'd like to point out to you, and the reason that I'm requesting personnel is Probably first and foremost, my membership roster has reduced dramatically in the last 10 years or so. And I've said this before, when I started on the department, we had a roster of 40 with a waiting list. We now have 25 people on the department, including career and paid on call. Most significantly with the paid on call membership is we have very limited firefighter personnel within that roster. I've told you before that I have 4 basically out of 11 paid on call people that are responding firefighters. And one of the things that we rely on heavily is the fact that those responders are able to respond on a moment's notice, along with the career staff that is off duty to be able to respond on a moment's notice. And frankly, that's not happening like it has in the past. So, for instance, today we had a woods fire that was relatively small, but we had the duty crew show up. And again, I don't want to say the what ifs to everything, but if certain circumstances in that fire had changed, it could have been a dramatically different outcome based on the minimum amount of personnel that were there. I had very few people come back to the station. In fact, for the longest time, I had one person here, one of my paid on call members. No career staff showed up as the return call for that. So when that comes down to another call at the same time, or relying on mutual aid help to come in and do that as well, we're running by the skin of our teeth. We really are. Exemplified that fire into a much bigger circumstance. Again, we got 4 people showing up to do a job that by NFPA standards requires 20 to get started. You know, and I'm not unrealistic that we're not gonna get to that 20 membership immediate response mark. But again, when we're showing up with 40 and expecting those, 4, John got me on that 40 number last time we spoke. Showing up with 4 personnel, expecting to fill 20 roles right out of the gate, you know, you're asking a lot of that membership. So I am asking that we progressively increase to that level. In my presentation, I asked for 6 positions in the narrative. Realistically, I'm looking for 3, and the reason for 3 is 1 member per shift to keep those shifts balanced all throughout. Our call volume is increasing all the time. We're helping with the EMS response. Now, one could argue that the responsibility of that EMS response is upon Northern Light Medical Transport to up their game to be there. But in reality, when they're dispersed and gone away on other calls, we're kind of help filling that bill because the need is there, and we want to be helpful to the citizens. Our population is growing. We're talking about the increase in economic development. We're talking about the increase in residential units in town. That only adds up in my mind to additional people, and the more people we get on a living basis is going to just have an increase on the demand for our services. Another big factor that comes into play, and again, I say this with all due respect to volunteerism, but when paid on call members, volunteers, part-time people, whatever you want to call them, when they attend a very low percentage of trainings, or they attend a very low percentage of incident calls, it's very difficult for us to train that individual consistently with everybody else so that we're all on the same experience and training level and put everybody to work in an equal fashion. You know, and I say that because so many times I've heard of, in many places, in this report that I gave you identified this. There were several different departments that said, if you have a pulse, we're going to take you in and we're going to use whatever you want to be able to offer to the department. So as a support role versus a firefighter role. Bottom line is, we need firefighters. Support role personnel are great if they show up and have been trained to the level of whatever they're going to be doing for tasks on a fire ground. But the bottom line is, we need people to put inside the building ready to fight fire and to do that job.
Any questions?
I do have questions.
Sure.
So you're saying there's a trend with a decrease in volunteerism and a decrease in folks who are able or willing to show up. What have you done as a department to court those people or to incite those people or to incentivize those people to come to the trainings and to participate more? I mean, if we can't afford it, then having a full-time, fully, all-time staff, the responsibility is going to have to fall back on the department to figure out a way to make it happen. And actually, getting buy-in from these volunteers and making them feel like part of a department and not we're full-time and you're volunteer. So what things has your department done to bring those people into the fold and make them feel like a part of the Ellsworth Fire Department and not just volunteers?
I'd be lying to you if I wasn't saying that honestly, we haven't done a lot recently. Years back, when Chief Marshall was here, we transitioned from volunteer, getting a stipend based on the number of trainings and incidents you responded to paid on call. Giving them an hourly wage for any and every hour that they would contribute, bolstered that just slightly, and then it faded right back off again. So it isn't simply money.
No, but I'll tell you, Richard, that the sense I'm getting from the folks that who have spoken to me about it is there's a definite divide, and it's discouraging, and that the volunteers feel like they're not part of your department. They're there to do the stuff that the other guys don't want to do, and they don't want to come do it because they don't feel like they're able to participate in firefighting things the way the full-time staff does. So if you're that guy and you want to do it, and instead of being able to really engage and feel like you're a part of it, you end up on cleanup crew or whatever, and without the full-time guys there participating, then that's going to discourage you and you're not going to come back. And so we've got to figure out a way, because right now, in my opinion, and I'm one of 7, right now we can't afford the full-time staff. And if we aren't taking every advantage we can to use what we can as for volunteerism to subsidize, if we're not encouraging them and we're actually discouraging them, and then we're doing a disservice.
So I do understand what you're saying, but I think we have fallen into a little bit of a trap that, for your comment of, if I've heard you right, the paid on-call memberships not being able to fight fire, we can't put the fire on hold
if they're not trained,
waiting for them to get there either. So yes, the career staff are getting to an incident a little bit sooner than others, and many times the incident has either been downplayed, limited in its expanse, or mitigated prior to the paid on calls arriving, because they're coming from home, they're coming from work,
right,
doing whatever. And I have heard some feedback of that, that we get there to roll up hose, or we get there to clean trucks, or we get whatever. But we can't just push the pause button on fire either.
Nope, I know, I agree with that, I do, but I think that there may be other solutions, and I don't know what they are, but I think it warrants some looking into and some discussion about ways to, so other areas, other towns only have volunteers. And I don't know. In my mind, I'm not sold on letting the volunteer force go. I think that there's some merit to it, and that we should spend some more time and energy figuring out how to make it work. That's just my 2 cents.
And if you could solve that question, young lady, you're worth millions of dollars in this state, because every department in this state is suffering the same issue that we are.
Well, I saw
So,
that in his
and
report that they are.
I love the conversation.
I guess one of my concerns as well is we're expecting, and I say this in general terms of the fire service, we're expecting to do an emergency services with volunteer help. And I say that respectively, because I know there's some towns that simply can't afford one career staff, let alone an entire career staff. But we are a city that's growing increasingly all the time. And with that, the demands for service are increasing faster than what our ability to respond to that is. And I caution you to expect that to be done by volunteerism, even though they're getting paid an hourly wage, it's pretty minimal. And to be able to leave a job, come do their task and go back, can they leave their job and come back? What are they doing at home? We're battling with life all the time and losing, you know, are they able and or willing to leave their family party, their vacation plans, their work times, whatever it may be?
The young children, if they're home with them.
Extremely difficult.
Richard, what is that wage?
It varies depending on the years of service and rank.
Average.
I'm sorry, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I'm gonna say 11 to 12.
They can mow Lisa's lawns and get paid more.
One of the things that hits Ellsworth pretty hard is we're a $1.1 billion assessed value. But that doesn't say what really is out there, because we got with Jackson Lab and everything else is nonprofit, tax exempt. I bet you we're close to 1.8.
The hospital.
The hospital, maybe 2 billion, that we're covering with tax dollars from half that.
Yeah, maybe it's not unusual in a service center for
No,
30%
exactly.
of it to
Yeah.
be.
Service center, that's what I
So
was
maybe
getting
$1.5
at.
billion, a little more than that.
We recently, a few years back, at a time that we were posting for a full-time position, we also posted for volunteer positions and listed that out, showing what the wages were and what the expectations were. We got, if I remember correctly, I think we got 10 or 12 career staff applications, and we got 2 volunteer or paid-on-call applications. And one of them, frankly, didn't even come close to meeting requirements. And the other one was more interested. He also put in an application for a career staff at the same time. He didn't pan out on either one.
I'm not suggesting that, that those things you said aren't true with the increased needs and the increased numbers and all of that. But what would 6 new full-time positions do to the mill rate?
I mean,
Half a mil.
That probably up, when fully burdened.
You figure what?
With insurance?
85 per?
Well, then you gotta clothe them.
Yeah, equip them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly for the first year,
Call it
600,000.
Well, anyways.
yeah. Well, yeah, 6 at.
But he's got the bargain of the year, though. He'll take 3, that's only half.
So 6 positions, and again, this is not a,
Into the mill.
You- even if it was 70 grand, Richard, do you think, somewhere in that range? I mean,
Reggie had a question or a
to
comment.
cover a firefighter, fully burden their
Might be
wages,
thinking better of it.
benefits, support.
I'm sorry, I wouldn't dare to
Yeah.
guess on that. I'd want
Yeah.
to give you good numbers.
Okay.
Closer to 80.
Yeah, but times 6, and that's.
But if
your-
we were replacing, volunteer slots, wouldn't we have some of that, like the SCBA and some of the stuff already? Or do you not have those for the volunteers?
The SCBA's are shared across the trucks. The
Okay.
turnout gear is an expense, that's roughly $3,000 per person.
Uniforms.
And uniforms are
Uniforms.
pretty much
probably-
customized to the person, right?
Yeah. Probably the percentage.
You don't have a lot of hand-me-downs, do you?
And quite honestly, you'd have to
Firefighter to another.
rent a mobile home to put over here to house them
We
in.
can fit 3 right now.
You give me 3, I'll find a spot for them.
No, we can fit 3.
Yes, Bagels have to
Give me
get in the
six,
back of
I'll find
Richard's
a
car.
Give me 40 and I'll do that.
It'd be hot racking.
Hot bunking.
Right,
Hot
hot.
bucking, I'd be sleeping again.
That's right. I think Reggie wanted to share something.
I just have a comment, and it kind of goes off from what Richard was saying. I joined the Ellsworth Fire Department for paid on call. I've made one call in almost 2 years. Maybe a half a dozen trainings. I just don't have time. I'm here in Ellsworth every day, and I don't even have time to make it to a car accident to help out. But I can see where there is a burden of people being able to attend. It's not necessarily not wanting to. So I would certainly rather leave my office and go play on the sun.
You have your own surprises, Reggie, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, I realize my case is a little different.
you're 24/7.
Right.
Ish. Water breaks, no timetable, right?
Right.
But I think that's a great comment, David, because he's 24/7, but he still has a life outside of work. as
Yeah.
We all do. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes for the firefighters, especially the paid on call people, because not only do they have a regular life, they have a job, they have children, they have a house to pay for and upkeep and all of that. Where a career firefighter or a career anyone, you're coming to work for your regular job, ready to go. So I think we ask a lot, and then again, not just Ellsworth, but in general, for a career or a profession like this, for people to be doing it by volunteer.
And something that's gonna affect your backfill, I've noticed recently downstairs is, some of your career firefighters getting a life. They're buying campers. They're taking their family up north for a week at a time. I think one of the guys said today at the Woods Fire that, in fact, it was my brother Dickie, that he was just leaving Winterport when this got toned out. So, we're going all over the state, and I'm not gonna come back from Greenville unless Ellsworth downtown's on fire, something like that, it's family time.
I think ideally, it should be a full-time force. I don't disagree with that. And I guess my concern and frustration is I don't know financially how to get there.
Keep the discussion going.
And I hate to, for some of the numbers, Richard, right now, it's our only option, and I hate to not figure out a way to incentivize some of them to continue to support while we figure out how to get to where we need to be, but it's not gonna be an overnight fix. So I don't want to I don't want to perpetuate the discouragement that the volunteers might have. And I appreciate what you're saying, and it is a balance, and some people can't make that balance work, but it's a pickle.
I think Richard's made a pretty good case for what he wants, and we've talked about it a lot. And I think we all probably have a pretty good idea of where we want to go with it.
Our most active paid on call firefighter made about 3% of everything last year.
Made what?
About 3% of calls and
Of
training
calls.
combined.
Which makes them pretty much a non-issue.
I made almost that many.
That's the most active.
Yeah.
I made almost that many.
Unofficially.
Yeah. Less than nothing isn't very much.
The other thing that I had mentioned earlier that I don't want to forget too is that I would recommend that as we look forward, that we either give me a nod or approval or whatever to apply for a safer grant as they come up. We missed this year's cycle just prior to the budget workshop starting. The only reason I probably didn't push that earlier is we have been successful in the not too distant past, and they don't give those year after year after year.
Right, if you don't
I would
pick it up when they
I
run
would
out.
certainly apply for it, but also caution that a grant is a grant and then never guaranteed.
Richard, do you have any personnel that are likely to retire within the next 3 years?
Mike Hangy is going to retire probably in the next 2 as the fire inspector, so that's not on necessarily the fire side. I do have one other that's getting close, probably, I think he's within 4 to 5 years. And they're gonna kind of line up after that.
How would you replace Mike Haney?
That's gonna be a challenge, I'll tell you right now.
I mean,
I
you-
would replace him as strictly a fire inspector. If they chose to.
I guess what I wanted to ask you is this something that filters up through the ranks, or do you look outside for something?
I can tell you there's no one that I'm aware of that is even remotely interested in that position.
That's what I suspected.
I don't think that's gonna pull away from the firefighting force.
Yeah.
I could be very surprised, but I don't believe anybody's interested in that.
That might be the time when it happens, is to make that a fire code officer.
Right.
And take it out of the ranks of the fire department, just
Put in code.
have it be an administrative thing.
I mean, it functions up in the code office now.
Right.
Oh,
It's
it does
more-
very well.
More akin to that.
Anything else? Any other subject to move on to? Or item?
Is it a consensus of this group that if the solid numbers aren't ready for Monday night, that we postpone action on the budget until we have positive numbers from the state?
I don't know. I'd have to see what happens between now and, with the state.
Well, revenue sharing. If we can knock 2/10 of a mil off because of the increase in revenue sharing, maybe 1/10 of a mil if the general purpose aid to education gets whacked a little bit higher, which they're talking about. There's an opportunity to bring this increase down substantially if we wait.
Down sounds good.
Yeah. I think,
Way down sounds
Yeah.
better.
I think if you schedule, think out perhaps a special meeting a week from Monday night out to that would be the 24th.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'll be in Canada.
You'll be in Canada, what about the 26th?
Whole week.
A week,
Plan that week's go, because this is
Yeah.
gonna be done.
yeah. I
You
mean,
can tell Con just like Heather did.
I mean, no, I would never bet anything on what might happen in Augusta, but I sense by next Monday night, we're gonna have a pretty good feeling. Whether we'll be at the point where you can put it in the bank or not is another matter. A week later, I would hope, the statutory adjournment's the 19th. Even if it drags out the rest of the week and goes to Saturday morning, that would still give us time for the following week to figure it out. Although calculating how much one might get, I mean, I think Tammy, you got a pretty good feel for where we're at, and you can always estimate and direct staff to reduce taxation by whatever additional revenues come in, and do it that way. Because we don't make the decision till commitment at the end of July, correct?
No, we make our decision.
You make your decision,
And
but
then Larry makes the decision
Right.
on the mill rate.
But the actual, right, but it isn't set till then, so you could direct staff to lower it by whatever additional revenues come in. but I guess we're just gonna have to play it by ear, but with a backup date that following week, and I would suggest earlier in the week the better, because these folks need time to set up the books and do whatever else that following week, because the following week after that is July 1st.
So are we adding in for the budget that's gonna be presented to us Monday, the position we just talked about around police? And is that gonna be, that's gonna be in addition to the current budget, right?
Yeah, I was just wondering kind of where, so we're gonna add that half position, insurance.
At this-
I'll have you on Friday what the effect
Yeah.
of that's gonna be. I'll be able to pull in the numbers.
And what we may have for options to offset
Will that
it.
increase your training too? Will you plan on this fiscal year coming up that we're talking about? Will you need to add money for the academy for your new
No.
hire? No.
But I
You
already.
said it won't be till December or something.
And I already increased my training budget this year.
Right.
All right.
Training budget is
Okay.
sufficient.
So just roughly, Glenn, what do you think this would cost half year at somebody going through the academy? Just, I mean, very roughly.
Well, the salary would be about 22,000.
Yep.
I don't know about.
And so burden that out
and all
through
that, And then the academy. is-
travel, whatever else, maybe 30 grand when you add everything in, roughly 25 to 30.
And outfitting them, yeah, you
Yeah.
probably, with salary and uniforms and academy, you're talking about, yeah,
Okay,
30,000.
we'll calculate it out, pencil through the numbers, and come back with some options how to
I've never
offset
seen a
that.
drop in
So we'll
20
have
years.
to build in insurance,
Right,
but we're gonna be reducing it by one person.
right.
Is there any additional equipment, vehicles of that nature that would need to be?
He's gonna be
added?
in the academy for what time he's spending next year, he'll be till May, correct? Then he's gonna be training with another officer,
Yeah, no, there's no need for additional,
not next
we
year.
we have weapons, we have all
Yeah.
the equipment that he would need.
It'll be the year after that that'll all be, rolled over. But we'll come back with numbers and options. And we'll also, on Friday, if we have any more guidance on the budget, I mean, it is possible they could have a budget by the end of the week, but,
I'll check with Kate Dufour,
yeah.
MMA legislative, see how she's
Yeah.
usually, she attends the appropriation committee as part of her job, so.
Yes, sir.
So I don't want to lose sight of our discussion on the library, because if we don't address it, then we'll be in the same place next year. We talked about potentially having a consultant. Do we want to figure out how we might fund a consultant so that it can at least have that discussion and look at it in a more planful manner? Or do we just want to proceed as we have been?
One possibility is to deduct the cost of an expert from the amount of money that the city gives the library.
Dale, I agree with you. I think we ask Mr. Cole to get a hold of Amy tomorrow and say, give us a ballpark number for a consultant. That's her specialty. And then Friday morning at finance, we can say yay or nay on adding it. Like, we wasted an hour of time talking about the library if we don't take the next step.
And I'm not even sure that she knows.
No.
I was
because
just thinking, she's
never-
probably not gonna know who to contact about
But
that.
at least,
She'll have the contacts a whole hell of a lot better than I will, or you will, or he will.
yeah. And we can work with her to try to figure out, what a ballpark figure might be, but even then, it may only be the beginning.
She's part of the Maine Library Association, National Library Association. I'm sure there's assets there that she can
Contacts
call up
there.
and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. What's the going rate?
And you might reach out to MANP. They might have something, Maine Association of Nonprofit.
Oh, right,
That
MAN,
They
yeah.
might have. some
That's a good
ideas,
idea.
In terms of, because really, the consultant is not to look at how to fundraise, just to help think through,
The model.
is there
The model.
viability for
Yeah.
doing this? Would it position the library successfully or not? Would it create, if it doesn't, is it gonna disrupt the library? Is it gonna ruin the
Yeah.
quality? Those are the answers we're seeking.
How do you get there?
To determine what direction to go in, not the direction's not decided.
I think if we decide to do the consultant, we do have to be careful how we go about selecting
Yeah,
this consultant. So it's not just biased toward the library or
Well,
biased toward the city.
yeah, I
council.
mean, they who sign the check to the consultant makes the rules. So if you hire the consultant as a council, then they will do your bidding.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, and I think the question for a consultant is, this is seen as a regional asset, but primarily a local liability. I mean, there are outside contributions, but the lion's share of it rests with the Ellsworth taxpayers. So how do you develop a model that recognizes the regional benefit and something more equitable in terms of supporting it? And what would follow from that is, how is it governed? How is it funded? And I don't know what precedent there is around the state for that kind of thing, whether somebody's gone from a municipal model to a more regional model. In Bangor, I don't know if Bangor was once part of the municipality. I believe it's independent now, but Bangor is of such a size that it's a bit different. I don't know, Gary, if you're familiar with any other. So, but I think MANP is a good suggestion, and we'll do some digging.
Good, well, that'll give you something to do tomorrow.
Yes, it will.
Anything further? On anything? It's a wrap.
Do you need this back?